Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom, where we explore big ideas about health that live in the smallest corners of our bodies. I'm Ethan Foster, your friendly neighborhood observer who'd rather watch the world go by than run in it. But today, I'm told we're talking about how to make running, or any healthy habit, stick like glue.
And I'm Alara Skye, brainy, quick-witted, and forever amused by Ethan's preference for observing the world with a cup of tea in hand. There's nothing wrong with spectating Ethan, but rumor has it, humans can also move their bodies once in a while.
Movement? That's radical talk, Alara. I'm more of a champion in the lesser-known sport of intellectual cardio. It's not as sweaty, and the only equipment I need is a good book. But apparently the rest of the world is obsessed with forming physical habits, like eating better or exercising. It's a big question. How do you make them stick?
Indeed, that's the question on so many minds. We hear you can form a habit in just 21 days, or at least that's the pop culture legend. You do something every day, put an X on a calendar, then, poof, like magic, you never forget again.
If only it were that easy. According to more detailed studies, 21 days is the unicorn of habit formation. Apparently, it can take anywhere from 2 to 5 months.
Now, if you're like me, hearing 2 to 5 months might seem like hearing your doctor say, you need to avoid chocolate for half a year. The immediate reaction is mild horror. But there's actually a lot of good news buried in that time frame.
I'm guessing the good news is that you can skip chocolate on fewer occasions if you spread it out.
My personal takeaway is that knowing a habit could take that long means you're probably not failing if you get to day 22 and still feel like a newborn giraffe on ice. We're told that once day 22 arrives, you're supposed to be unstoppable, but it's more realistic to realize we're all different. Some folks are unstoppable at 59 days, some at 66 days, and a few might need 100+ days to reach automatic pilot.
I like that. A new, more forgiving approach. Instead of feeling like a failure if your spin class isn't your new obsession by day 21, you realize that you've got 2 to 5 months of daily baby steps, or, in my case, daily waddle steps.
And it's not just about how many days, it's also about the complexity of the habit. There's a world of difference between deciding to drink a glass of water each morning and orchestrating an entire half-hour workout routine with a side of kale smoothies.
I assume the simpler the habit, the faster it can become second nature. Drinking water before coffee? Pretty straightforward. Doing 50 sit-ups daily? That might take a bit longer to feel like autopilot.
And let's be honest, the water thing might stick quicker because the reward is immediate. You feel more awake, more hydrated. Meanwhile, exercise is that friend who shows up with benefits but sometimes demands a lot of effort before you see them.
That friend is always bossy too, makes you sweat, wants you to shower more often, demands a better schedule. Now, let's talk about the brain and how it's apparently a big chunk of habit-making hardware.
The star player here is a region called the basal ganglia, with a feature known as chunking. That's where repeated actions get bundled together, so you go from step 1, step 2, step 3 to do it all at once without thinking. Like tying your shoes or driving along a route you've driven 1,000 times.
I've always wondered why it's so easy to zone out while driving home, yet I still can't remember to drink water before coffee unless I set a talking alarm named Alara yelling, "Hydrate, Ethan."
If I had a nickel for every time I've said hydrate, Ethan, I could retire on a private island. Anyway, your basal ganglia basically lumps these repeated tasks together so you can do them on autopilot. You form that trigger routine reward loop, and boom, welcome to the land of habits.
Makes sense. But it also explains why certain less helpful habits stick, like automatically reaching for sweets after dinner. That sugar hit is immediate, so your brain says, yes, let's do that again, and again, and again.
Dopamine loves a good sweet treat. If you want a habit to become second nature, it helps to give yourself a real or perceived reward. Maybe the satisfaction of checking a box, the feeling of instant refreshment, or the knowledge that you're conquering the day like a health warrior.
Yes, let's talk about that subtle difference between folks who get to day 22 and have no trouble pushing forward, and those who still need coffee with a sugar meltdown. Some say it has to do with consistent timing and contextual cues.
If you do your new habit at the same time each day, like right after brushing your teeth or right before you leave for work, then your brain associates that routine with a particular cue. Eventually, it becomes automatic, like, I brushed my teeth, so now I do my daily stretch. You free your mind for other tasks, such as pondering the meaning of life or writing comedic lines for your next show.
Pondering the meaning of life might be a bit too big for me in the mornings. I'd prefer to tackle that after lunch, once my brain is fully awake.
People do better when they choose habits they actually want, not ones that a tyrannical boss or well-intentioned family member tries to impose. If you're forced to adopt a vegan diet, but you prefer burgers once in a while, the new habit might not last unless you find your own compelling reasons to change.
I know that feeling. If I'm strongly encouraged to do push-ups by someone else, my rebellion surfaces. But if I decide I want more upper body strength, for reasons that personally motivate me, then I'll actually show up. Maybe not gracefully, but I'll show up.
Which leads to another point about that 2 to 5 months time frame. Everyone's lifestyle is different. If you have a super structured day, it might be easier to carve out that 10-minute slot for a new habit. If your schedule is all over the place, you might need more strategy to make it happen.
The moral of the story is that if you skip a day, you haven't burned your entire new habit to the ground. Missing one day doesn't break the chain, but missing a bunch might unravel that fragile routine.
Right. You just reset and keep going. The only real habit breaker is deciding you're done. A single day off is more like a speed bump than a crater in the road. The key is not letting that speed bump derail you.
So, how do we do this properly? I'm hearing that routine is the magic ingredient. It's not enough to rely on willpower for the next 60 days, because willpower alone is a limited resource. Routine keeps it going once motivation fizzles.
Routines are like the unsung heroes of good habits. They remove choice from the equation. If you always walk right after lunch, you don't have to decide if you'll walk at 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. or 8 p.m. You do it after lunch, no debate. Done deal.
Which is good for me, because if you give me too many choices, I'll second guess everything until it's bedtime. Then I'll say, oh well, maybe tomorrow.
And tomorrow becomes next week becomes next year, and next year you're still referencing that new habit you meant to start. Routines let us slip past decision fatigue. If you normally get up at 7 a.m., brush your teeth, and then stretch for 5 minutes, you're making fewer decisions. You just flow from one to the next.
That's the beauty of chunking. The more we group tasks together, the easier they become. Now, let's circle back to how we actually anchor a new habit. Give me a step-by-step, Elara-style blueprint.
Step 1. Attach your habit to something you already do. If you're a tea person, promise yourself you'll read one page of a health book right after you take that first sip. If you're a coffee person, do one small stretch while the coffee is brewing. You're just piggybacking onto an existing routine that's guaranteed to happen anyway.
Step 2 must be keeping it small. I've tried going all in with daily 5 a.m. boot camps, and by day 3 I'm crawling in at 6:30 a.m., sweaty and spirit only.
Keep that first step ridiculously tiny. Like, if you want to meditate, start with 60 seconds. If that feels easy, you'll likely do it. And once you do it, it's easier to keep going. You build momentum, and your mind says, I can do 1 minute, so maybe I can do 5. Next thing you know, you're mindful enough to ignore my comedic jabs.
Never, Elara. Your comedic jabs are my fuel. Next, plan for disruptions. Because, let's face it, life is about as predictable as a cat on catnip.
Precisely. If you rely on the idea that everything will be perfect for 66 days, you're setting yourself up for heartbreak. Instead, you plan that if tomorrow's schedule is crazy, you'll do a shorter version of your habit. If you can't do your full workout, do a quick walk. If you can't read your usual 5 pages, read 1. It's about consistency, not being perfect.
Which transitions nicely into environmental cues. You set up your world so that the habit is glaringly easy, and the bad habits become slightly more challenging.
If you want to do yoga in the morning, set your mat out the night before. If you want to eat healthier, place the fruits on the counter so they're in your face. Less rummaging for apples in the back of the fridge means more chance you'll actually eat them.
That's my problem. My apples are always behind the leftover pizza, so I never see them until the pizza is gone.
Now we're onto something. The final piece is tracking progress. Some folks do well with a habit tracker or a simple checklist. But the big caution is to focus on the act of doing, not on some inflated scoreboard.
So, if I'm tracking my daily push-ups, I should just note that I did them, not brood over the fact that yesterday I did 12 and today I only did 11.
Exactly. The victory is in showing up daily. If you get too wrapped up in the metrics, you might lose sight of the end goal, building a lasting routine that's second nature. Once it's second nature, you can refine it if you wish.
So, to recap, one big myth to bust is the 21-day rule. It's not that easy. The average person needs at least 2 months, maybe more, depending on the complexity of the habit.
Plus, morning habits might form faster because your mind is fresh and fewer distractions pop up. But not everyone's a morning person. If you can't do mornings, then anchor your habit to a consistent time in the afternoon or evening.
If I'm not consistent, it'll remain a daily negotiation in my head. Nobody wants that. We want autopilot. So, 2 to 5 months is the realistic window. Yet, ironically, we often give ourselves only 21 days. That sets up a lot of people to feel like they've failed.
Or they do the fabled 21-day challenge, see no autopilot at day 22 and think, I must not be disciplined. It's not about discipline. It's about building a system that does the heavy lifting once it's established.
There's a fun name for that system, chunking. Once you chunk everything together, you free yourself from the endless mental chatter. It's kind of refreshing to know my laziness might be partly a hardware problem, not just me.
It's not laziness. It's about how we're wired to conserve energy. If something is tough, your brain tries to skip it until it's forced to figure out a more efficient route. Once you embed a habit into daily life, your brain shifts it into autopilot, saving conscious energy.
It's the same reason we can arrive home sometimes and not remember the drive. The routine is so ingrained that the brain doesn't need to be hyper-vigilant. If we can transform daily exercise into that same autopilot, we'll likely stick to it in the long run.
Precisely. And once it's in autopilot, it's easier to do it even when motivation is low. Then your healthy habit is as natural as brushing your teeth, except hopefully more fun than brushing your teeth.
Which also begs the question, are there any quick fixes? Some folks love the idea of a magic pill that transforms your entire life overnight.
Magic pills exist primarily in fairy tales, Ethan. Habit building is about consistent, intentional repetition, attaching behaviors to cues, starting small, planning for disruptions, and tracking progress. That's your real magic.
Fine, I'll skip the fairy tale approach. Let's imagine our listeners want to pick just one habit to form. Suppose they want to walk 15 minutes daily. They anchor it to finishing breakfast. They keep the start so small, maybe 5 minutes, so they can't talk themselves out of it. If they have to leave early for a meeting, they do a 2-minute version around the block. They track each day they show up.
That's a brilliant example. Maybe it blossoms into a half-hour walk. Or maybe they stick with 15 minutes, because that's enough. Either way, the consistent repetition at the same time, day in and day out, helps the basal ganglia chunk everything so it becomes a natural routine.
And in about 60, 90, or 120 days, they'll realize they didn't even think about whether to walk or not. They just did it.
And if they miss a day, they don't have to dramatize it. You skip one day, you get back on track the next day. No meltdown is necessary.
I love that. It takes the pressure off because so many of us try to be perfect and end up bailing when we slip. Let's do a final rapid-fire recap. Attach your habit to a routine you already have. Make the first step so small you can't fail. Expect life to interfere. Have a plan for it. Adjust your environment to make the new habit obvious and easy. Track your progress and focus on consistency.
Exactly. So to all our listeners, don't be discouraged if you've tried something for a few weeks and it hasn't stuck yet. The timeline is longer than you might think, but it can absolutely be done. You just need consistency, a solid plan, and a forgiving attitude when real life happens.
And on that note, we'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. I'm Ethan Foster, reminding you that if I can do it, you probably can do it better.
And I'm Alara Sky, cheering you on with all the witty banter I can muster. Keep those habits small, smart, and sustainable.
See you next time, everyone. And hey, if you remember to take your vitamins, floss, stretch, or drink water today, congratulations. You're on your way to forging a powerful new routine. Stick with it, and we'll all soon be living proof that consistency really does pay off.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe now and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.